That was another fascinating talk. And the next one is going to be given by Professor Mary Ellen Geiger from the University of Chicago. The title is Role of Medical Imaging Data Commons in the Development of AI of COVID-19.
Thank you. I'm presenting this with a variety of colleagues, Ravi Maduri and Jordan Furman. Ravi was going to be here. Jordan's here. He has a poster. Find him and discuss more with him. So I also want to give you my funding and conflicts of interest. First, I want to thank C3AI for this funding opportunity. It has grown, and we've now built on it through 2 other funded projects, which I will touch on in this talk. So with the COVID pandemic, we had an urgent and critical public health crisis, and we needed to address various aspects of it: surveillance, differential diagnosis, predicting and monitoring patients, and monitoring the post-COVID patient. So we wanted to look at what's the role for imaging and AI. My lab has a background of multiple decades in AI, medical imaging, especially with breast cancer, other cancers, and other diseases. So we took this on with this grant. Initially, and now, we are looking at thoracic imaging of the presence of COVID-19. We started with the lung, looking at both chest radiographs and CT. Here are some examples. Chest X-ray on the left and 3 CTs here on the right. And our goal was to develop AI because of the potential to overlook disease. Earlier you heard how radiology would do better with aiding the radiologists. And that's what we're after here. We're not trying to replace the radiologist with the computer, but to provide an aid as the clinician works up a COVID patient. Our C3AI grant had various aims, and I list them here. Actually, I read better on this side. We want to first create a data set, and we did that. We then wanted to develop aid to distinguish COVID positive versus negative, recognizing that doesn't really have a strong clinical motivation because there's other tests that can do that. But we used it for some development. And then we went to develop aid to predict severity of COVID in the patient and also assess some explainability methods. Our achievements are listed here, and I'll go through some of these. So we did develop the algorithms, and I'll go through those, and we became leaders in AI algorithms and in imaging of COVID-19, and that led to MIDRC. MIDRC was established through an NIBIB-funded COVID-19 contract, $20 million over 2 years, and I'll talk about that. And this also, when we went for the C3AI grant, I called up Argonne, and Ravi Maduri became a collaborator with us. And now we've continued to work together, and we recently received, Argonne did, and we joined in the DOE pilot grant on privacy-preserving federated learning. Also working together with MIDRC, we've now acquired Azure credits to help in our grand challenge, various projects there on COVID-19. So let's get back to developing AI for interpreting images of COVID-19. It's important to assess the severity of the patient. What the patient presents, what kind of treatment do they need? How do we allocate resources? But how do you determine if a patient is severe or not? When you train in an AI algorithm, you need markers of severity and not. So we had to think of surrogate markers of severity. And I'll go through 2 examples. One, Elizabeth Koo from the lab, who worked on chest X-rays, and there the surrogate severity marker was based on intensive care, and Jordan Furman, who worked on lung CT scans, where the severity was who would be recommended for treatment with steroids. I want to point out that we did this in the very early days of COVID-19. COVID-19 has changed. When you study cancer AI, you have decades of data change in disease presentation, change in imaging, change in treatment. With COVID-19, everything was compressed in 2 years. So data that you acquired at the beginning of the pandemic might be very different from data that you're acquiring at the end. Okay, so let's look at the methods. Here, we looked at chest x-rays, looking at can we assess who has more severe disease or not. It was trained on whether the patient was intubated or admitted to the ICU versus those that were not. We used chest radiographs from over 1,000 patients, looking at their standard and portable radiographs. This was based on a curriculum learning strategy and transfer learning using the DenseNet 121. And what you see here is first starting with training weights from ImageNet, then trained with data on other chest radiographs with other diseases, more chest radiographs from a pneumothorax challenge, and finally, the cases that we had from the University of Chicago. This was trained. The output, as shown here, would be indication of who would likely be a patient with severe COVID versus one who would not be. The output is this probability of would the patient need intensive care upon presentation with their chest x-ray. Performance is respectable, AUC of 0.77. However, we're now in the process of validating that because we've now acquired 3 times the amount of data to check this out and further train. Jordan, with his lung CTs, used a similar technique called cascaded deep transfer learning, where he used transfer learning from training with emphysema and converted those weights to further training on COVID-19 patients because you don't have many medical images as you do in real-life images, so you need to do transfer learning. Here, again, a very respectable score with his patient in the task of distinguishing severe, those who were recommended for steroid treatment versus those who were not. And he's in the process of now validating this on 900 patients, each having multiple imaging CTs. He also looked in a pilot study of how this severity score could be used to monitor the patient. So here in red are the patients on COVID treatment, and as you can see, their severity score is decreasing until they were released from the hospital. The blue line are those that were not severe, and it continues. So this is very promising data for which he will use the new data to validate also. Well, then we received the MIDRC contract. And I'll talk more about this. You can learn more at the website. So this is the $20 million contract funded by the NIBIB. I'm Contact PI, and it's hosted at the University of Chicago. The interesting thing, it is led by the APM, the ACR, and the RSNA. It's a medical imaging data commons developed by medical imaging experts. But it's very multidisciplinary. We have 2 major parts. We want to have an open data repository and also jumpstart some AI work. We are currently a collaboration of 24 institutions, over 100 investigators, and they're spread across the US. We've worked on building the airplane while designing it and while using it. So this is the technology, these are the technology development projects, but best can see by our 4 MIDRC data science subcommittees. We are very careful about data standards in IT. We're careful about data policy and procedures, getting the data, contributing the data, using the data, data quality and harmonization, as well as the user portal at the end. And how does this work? Well, we have 2 data input portals, one through RSNA and one through ACR. After that, we work on de-identification, curation. Now, we may take in an image that's not the highest image quality, but it's a clinical image. Because when you train AI, you need all sorts of images, not just the best images. We perform harmonization, annotation, and that brings in the APM expertise in that. We have 1 output portal that sits at the University of Chicago. You can check out that website. And about 80% of our cases are open. And this lowers the playing field for everyone to use and develop. We want it AI-ready, trustworthy, fair, and representative. A unique aspect of MDRC is that we have 20% going to what we call the sequestered commons. Those cases no one has access to. We will use that to test an algorithm of an investigator, of a company, and we work with FDA to expedite through regulatory so we can get to the people. So here's our website you can go to, as well as the Data Commons website. Currently, we've ingested over 80,000 imaging studies. 50,000 or so are going under quality check, harmonization. We use the LOINC method, and 30,000 are released already for investigators to download. We're very sensitive about bias and diversity. Here back in May, we were comparing our data to the US Census. Currently, we've updated that. And we want to point out that we currently have data coming from 23 of the 50 states. Some of them are in the pipeline of just getting the data ready, signing the contributing agreements, going through the lawyers. Some data is already in, being checked, and some is published already. I mentioned the sequestered commons. This has been a dream of mine for decades, where we maintain the integrity of the test set. Because if someone were to come to me and say, this is our claim, this is our clinical question, this is the population, we want to evaluate our system, we randomly draw from a sequestered set based on that distribution, test it, and give them a score, say 83%, nothing else. They don't know which cases did well or not. They can come back in a year, and we'll randomly draw again. And this will accelerate translation of AI to the public. So we also have various research projects. Because of time, I'm going to skip this. Interoperability is really important. We are experts in medical imaging, not EHR, not genomics. So what we want to do is meet up in the cloud and interoperate with these other ones. So we currently have pilots going with N3C that collects COVID EHR data, Biodata Catalyst on their PEDAL study, and we have a collaboration with Argonne on privacy-preserving federated learning. So what went wrong with AI during COVID? You see a lot of papers out there saying hundreds of AI tools, a lot of papers. Nothing's out there working clinically yet when it comes to medical imaging. Well, part of the problem is these Frankenstein data sets where there's multiple commons out there. Sometimes data might be, same patient might have data in 2 or more commons. There's leakage between training and testing. Also, MDRC is a community. Maybe there was a lack of communication, so this hinders the truth, and also lack of consideration of bias. So we hope MDRC becomes a national resource to support the medical imaging ecosystem, high quality, representative, trustworthy data, addressing bias. We're a community. I'm on the phone. I'm on Zoom every day with MDRC, where we're working to develop tools for evaluation. We're doing the sequestering, and we're lowering the barrier of access to make this accessible to everybody, and we're working to translate it to the public. So C3 AI got us started on this road of analyzing AI for COVID-19. Extremely grateful. I touched on 2. For 3 here, this is the grant of Ravi Maduri, of which University of Chicago is a subcontract on federated learning. He unfortunately got called away at the last minute, so he's not here. But this we're looking for because in the future, it's going to be a mixture of centralized data commons, which MDRC has now, but using federated learning to connect with other sites. So none of this could have been done without the lab. Brilliant graduate students, remarkable research staff, and fellow colleagues, and of course, the MDRC. So I'll leave this up. I do have time remaining, so if there's any questions.
Yeah, we actually have time for a couple of questions.
Thank you very much. Great work. In this case also, and in other prior talks too, do you do controls against RSV or things that are very close in terms of some of the symptoms, perhaps, versus not? Yeah.
Well, when we collect the data from cases, we will know the truth. We pull that from the clinical record. So we won't, the University of Chicago data has all the truth. We have a massive COVID data mark that has EHR and a lot of other things. For the MIDRC, we've limited it so that one can do COVID positive versus negative or prognosis, that is severity. But we don't want to encroach on other commons by saying we're going to do everything, because that's not nice, that's playing nice in the sandbox. So yes, our truth, it's a very good point, is solid from the medical record. A lot of radiologists involved too that would, as we curate the data, looking at it doesn't make sense.
Okay, then let's thank Professor Geiger.